All right, so Adam was walking around in the Garden of Eden, and he was lonely because he didn't have a companion. And so he said to God, he said, hey, God, I need a companion. I need someone I can talk to, I can tell all my troubles to, that'll just always be there for me. But I need him to not be judgmental when I want to buy a new grill. And God said, hey, Adam, I can do that for you, but it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. And so Adam said, what can I get for a rib? Speaking of ribs, we're going to do baby back ribs today, so y'all stay tuned. This is my brother, Michael.
And this is my brother, TJ. And we're the Barbecue Brothers.
All right, guys, let's cook some ribs today. First off, let's get into what it looks like prepping and seasoning these things. Okay, so when you're prepping your ribs, there's just a couple of things here that are pretty important. You want to get them laid out here on your tray. The very first thing we want to do, you want to get like a paper towel or whatever you want to use. We want to dry them off really good. Make sure your pan's dry. Make sure the ribs are dried off really good. This is going to help the seasoning. We're going to do a couple other things with that as well to help with the seasoning. But it's also going to make our next step a lot easier. And our next step is taking off the membrane. So on the bone side, which is the concave side, if you will, sorry to get nerdy on you there, but the concave side, that's the bone side. And what we want to do, there's a membrane there that we want to get off. That's going to allow it to take in more smoke, and it just helps overall with the cooking process. And so what I do is I use the paper towel, I clean off, and really make sure on this end, so there's going to be an end with a lot of meat on it, and the bone's going to kind of stop, and it'll just be meat hanging off. And then you're going to have an end that just has a flat end, and it's going to be a bone right there. The flat end with the bone, that's where we want to pull the membrane from. What I do, I just make sure that side is extra dry, and I'll try to find a little piece of it. It's just a really thin, little kind of slimy looking layer. You want to find that and pull on it. You're not going to hurt anything. Just find it, pull on it. If I can get a little bit of a pull, then usually you can get your fingers up under there and just get it going good. Sometimes you just can't get a hold of it good because it's just a little bit too slippery. So I'll use this paper towel and I'll always get a hold of it good with that, and I'll be able to pull it and get it started. And then you can just grab it with your hand, and it should just pull off the rest of the way. Just try not to tear it as you're pulling it, because then you're going to have to potentially try to re-grab it again if it's torn really close to the meat. So yeah, that's the first thing, is just getting all that off. Okay, so now that we've prepped the meat, the next thing we want to do is get our seasoning on it. I've got my homemade rub that I make here. That's what I'm going to put on this. What I like to do, I like to flip it over to bone side up. There's a couple of reasons I like to do this side first, because the main one is once you get your seasoning and everything else we're going to do on there, when we flip it over, that part will not be touching the pan, so the pan's not going to rub off seasoning. If you did the other side first, then you flip it, you're going to rub off a lot of your seasoning. So that's one of the things that ribs give us to really help us out with keeping that seasoning on. So I like to sprinkle a little bit on the bone side, just a tiny bit of seasoning to get it under there. The next step, what we're going to do is we're going to take some mustard, and that may sound crazy if you haven't seen this method, but it's really common. We're going to put a little bit of mustard, and I like to do just a tiny bit. Let me explain real quick what that does. The mustard is going to basically create a crust for us, and you won't even taste it. It's going to cook all, it's going to dry up. All the mustard flavor is going to cook out, and you're going to end up with just this nice little crust that's holding in the seasoning in. So it's going to taste really nice. So it's just a neat little trick to get a nice crust with some flavor to it. So I don't do a lot of mustard. The main reason for that is because if you get it too thick, it won't cook out, and you'll have little globs of mustard that you can taste, and you definitely don't want that. So what I do is I make these little lines all the way down the ribs, and it's just a really thin line kind of spread out, and that usually is about right. And then I'll spread it out on the ribs really good, and kind of the method I use for the amount of layer I want is I want to see mustard pretty much everywhere on this part of the meat, and then I want to just take my hand and I'll just kind of scrape off the excess. So it's pretty much as thin of a layer as you can get that covers the entire rib. That's the way that I like to do it. All right, so now once we've got that done, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our rub again, and we're gonna just sprinkle it over the top. By the way, you'll notice I'm gonna add a little bit of pepper on top as well. This rub that I made, I didn't put the pepper in it, so I'm just gonna add it manually myself. Usually I would just include the pepper in the rub, but I didn't have it in today. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of coarse ground black pepper on top of that. And it looks really good. I mean, I already kind of wanna eat it now, but let's not do that. So yeah, it looks pretty good. So now we're gonna flip it so that the not concave side is up. And we're gonna do the same thing. So we're gonna do a light sprinkling on the top, get our mustard on there, and then do another sprinkling on top, and add our pepper if you want to add it, or if your rub doesn't have it. And that's it. These ribs are ready to put on the grill. All right, so now that you're prepped and seasoned, it's time to get these things on the smoker. I like to do mine at around 225, sometimes as low as 200, depending on how much time I have. And I do them to an internal temp of 195. That's about the right temperature. So we just place them on the pit here. The one thing I want to point out is when you're putting the probe in, you want to find two bones kind of in the thicker part of the rib. Then you want to find the exact middle between those, and you want to stick the probe right in there about halfway into the meat. Just kind of feel as you're sticking it in, feel for if it were to bump onto something. If that happens, you definitely don't want that, because you don't want the tip of the probe touching the bone. And that's something you have to be really careful with ribs. I will say that some people like to wrap theirs mid-cook. I don't do that. I haven't really noticed a huge difference. It's definitely something you can do if you want to. Maybe around like 165, 160, you could wrap them. It technically would keep them a little more juicy. I just don't think it's worth the trouble of wrapping them and then trying to find the right positioning for the probe. It's not a big deal, but it's just the payoff hasn't been worth it for me. But that's up to you. All right, so here we are. We're about 2 hours in. Let's have a look and see how they're doing. Yep, looking pretty good. They got a little ways to go still, so let's keep on cooking. All right, so they've reached 195, so it's time to take them off. Let's take a look real quick. As you can see, the mustard is completely gone. You can't tell that it was there at all. It's turning this black crust, and that's exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and get these things off of the smoker. We'll get them inside, and we'll do the next steps. All right, so now that we've got them on the tray here, what I like to do is I like to wrap them, and I'm gonna stick them in a cooler like I did with brisket and some other meats, and we're just gonna let them sit there for a few hours. So I usually wrap them in this thick aluminum foil like you see here. You can do 1 or 2 layers, it's up to you. 2 will just help a little bit more with holding the heat in. So I'm gonna wrap mine twice here, and then that's it. Once they're wrapped, we'll stick them in the cooler, and they'll come back in 3 or 4 hours. All right, so these sat in the cooler for 4 hours, and I've got them on the tray here. I'm gonna open them up, and we'll take a look. They look pretty good. They've been sitting here for a while, so I know they're gonna be tender and juicy. Let's take a cut out of one and see what it looks like. Yeah, that's exactly what we're looking for. Juicy, nice, not falling off the bone, but it's plenty tender, so that's what we want. All right, so we had ribs for dinner, and they were excellent. Turned out great as always. I really like this method. I hope you guys give it a try. If you do, let me know what you think. If you have any feedback on things that I could do better, always interested in that, always looking to improve. So feel free to do that. As always, if you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and click that little bell so you get notified. Thank you guys so much.